Elementary music teacher friend, you love what you do, but you might feel unappreciated and, in fact, unseen some days. You may even feel like you're on a music teacher island and just want to connect with other music teachers who can relate to both your struggles and wins when it comes to teaching elementary music. I get you and understand completely the feelings you're having. That's why each and every week, the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast will provide you with solo and guest episodes that will help you realize you're not alone in your music teaching journey. Throughout each episode, my goal is for you to be able to walk away with actionable steps and ideas to help you feel like you're ready to take on the new week with whatever challenges may be thrown your way. Hi, I'm your host, Jessica Peresta, and I'm so glad you're here. Whether you're at home, in your car, in the shower, or wherever else you're listening, grab your cup of coffee or whatever other beverage is nearby and listen in to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. Welcome back to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. I'm so excited to have you back today. I am your host, Jessica Peresta, and this episode is about Black History Month, but not just Black History Month. It's about celebrating Black history all school year long with your students, and we're going to touch on what that means, why that's important to me in this episode today. If you're a returning listener, I want you to know I appreciate your support more than you could ever imagine, and you are what keeps me going on this podcast, and I love connecting with my listeners in my free Facebook group or through Instagram messages, and just I appreciate you listening in. It means so much to me. And if you're a new listener, welcome to the podcast. You're just joining the party, and I'm so glad to have you here. So today's episode, like I said, is about Black History Month. And I want to read a quote that I shared on my social media this last week. And it said, reminder, celebrating Black History Month in the music room isn't just a month to check off your teacher to-do list, but about truly acknowledging and teaching about the music, culture, and history every single day. Now, with that said, yes, February is a month set aside for Black history, to celebrate the musical artists, the great styles of music that came from Black culture, and to really truly acknowledge it, celebrate it, and to be aware of it, and to listen to music and all the things. But I truly believe that Black history should be celebrated all year long, not just, 1 month where you're like, okay, this is the only month we're going to focus on music from Black history. So I wanted to acknowledge that. And to say that Black history shouldn't just come around in the music room one time a year. It's something that should be experienced by your students every week in various means of learning. This school year especially, we've talked about equity in education and making sure all of your students feel seen, valued, heard through what you're posting on your walls, books you're reading to your kiddos, what music are you bringing into the music room, all those different conversations you're having with your students, making sure that they feel seen and heard and appreciated. So equity is super important. And when we talk about that, it's not just 1 month of the school year, right? It should be happening all school year long. So what is posted on your walls is important to consider. And you can change up bulletin boards, of course. And as Black History Month is the month of February, you can highlight Black musical artists more than maybe you have in other months, and bring them to the forefront. Make some bulletin boards, celebrate these musical artists, talk about them, learn about them, teach about them, listen to the music, show videos to your students. But what is posted on your walls other months of the school year as well? What books and literature are you reading to your students? Are you making sure that your students see themselves in the books with what the pictures look like, that there's different colors and skin tones represented in these stories when you're bringing these books into your classroom? What cultures from around the world are your students learning music from? I personally have always liked doing a culture of the month, and then you can bring in music from that different culture, varying it up, or you could do multiple cultures of the month, making sure students are like knowing their culture and they're seeing it represented in the music room is so important. So what cultures from around the world are they learning music from in your music room? And are they getting to learn and dissect popular music they hear every day on the radio? don't be afraid to bring popular music into your classroom. Sometimes kids don't associate music they're listening to outside of the school building with music they're learning in the school building. And so form connections with your students. And of course, make sure it's school appropriate. But I had a conversation the other day with a music teacher, and I said, you could always bring the instrumental track in. You don't have to have students listen to the words if there's cussing and things like that. Of course, make sure it's school appropriate because you don't want to lose your job, right? But at the same time, bring in that music and talk to the students like, what music influenced this musical artist to write this? What is rap? Do you hear other styles of music like blues, R&B, jazz that influenced this musical artist to write this? What is a hip hop beat? Why did they write this? How many verses do you hear? Do you hear a chorus? Dissect the music with your students and make sure that they feel like what they're listening to is important to you. Remember, it goes back to forming relationships with your students. And a lot of times, if you're struggling with classroom management, maybe the relational aspect needs to happen a little bit more than it has been. And maybe you need to go back to finding connections with your students and connect with music they love, just like you're wanting them to connect with the music that you are bringing into your music room. So students should be immersed in learning about so many different cultures in the music room. They should always feel seen and heard. Every day they come into music, they should feel seen and heard by what you're teaching, putting on your walls, reading about, listening to, having conversations around. And so teaching songs, activities, books, and celebrating Black History Month in the month of February is, of course, important. Of course it is. And it should be the highlight of your month of February, but it should also be celebrated all year long. And so I wanted to have an episode around this today because I truly want you to be focusing all school year long on celebrating different histories, different cultures, and not just in one month. All right. But with that said, we're going to talk about some ways you can celebrate Black History Month in the month of February. But these activities, like I said, you can do all school year long as well. So, celebrate Black History Month by truly focusing on the great Black composers and musical artists. So, how do you determine who those are? Well, that's up to you. Just like anything that happens in your classroom, you are the music teacher. Which means you get to make the decisions. You get to decide what songs are you teaching? What musical artist are you teaching about? Which songs from those musical artists are you going to bring into your music room to listen to? What activities are you going to do with those songs? All of that is up to you. And one thing that's hard for me is the fact that there are so many amazing musical artists, composers, styles of music, songs to teach different concepts with, and there's no way that you can get to it all, right? There's no way you can get to it all. But with that said, you just choose something and go with that. And that's what you do as a teacher, right? You make decisions every day based on your knowledge, what your students need from you, and then you just do it. And if you don't get through everything, that's okay. Maybe something you can do is highlight some of your favorite Black musical artists and composers, and then you maybe make, I don't know, on a Google slide or something like that, a list of other musical artists you didn't have time to get to, so students can explore it on their own time. That's definitely a good idea, and you can suggest looking it up on their own. But acknowledge and teach about Black composers and artists. Make sure that it's important. Make sure you talk about them, talk about their life, talk about the style of music that they are a part of. Talk about what influenced them to be a musician. Talk about where they came from. What neighborhood are they from? Why did they sing the type of music or play the type of music they played? Bring in all these different conversations, and it's so important that your kiddos learn about it. And because you're the music teacher, right? And so what's really cool about being the music teacher is if a lot of times, if you don't bring in these conversations and these musical artists and bring in opportunities for your kiddos to listen to different styles of music and genres of music, they're really not going to get the opportunity anywhere else sometimes. And so because of you, your kids are getting to learn about so many different styles and cultures of music. In your classroom, you should always be teaching about a variety of different cultures, composers, musical artists, instruments, and musical genres from around the world. Whether that is having a different culture of the month every month, whether you like to do a variety of cultures every month, where it's not just one a month, but it's several a month, that's up to you how you do that. But remembering the point is to make sure your students feel seen, heard, and appreciated, and they're experiencing and immersed in a lot of different cultures and countries through what they're listening to, reading about, and participating in with singing and learning music in general. So kids should constantly be exposed to lots of different types of music, and they should see themselves in your classroom. What do you have visually represented by also by what they're listening to and learning, which we talked about at the beginning of this episode. It shouldn't just take a month to come around for you to shift your focus and begin teaching about Black artists, but by now students should already be used to this just being a part of what you do in your music room. And this is not a guilt trip for anyone. This is not me saying, if you haven't done this yet, then you're a horrible music teacher. No. Are you making the effort to do it? Have you maybe changed around one or two things you've done this year to make an effort to be a little bit more equitable in your music room? Have you changed out some of the songs and activities maybe you've done in the past, and now you've changed them out for other things because you know that they're not appropriate anymore? And so if you're making an effort to do this, that is the goal. Is there's no one that's perfect, but are you making an effort to change up what you're doing and to make sure your students feel seen and heard? But if you haven't done this yet in your classroom, it's never too late to start, and you can always make this a goal of yours moving forward. We're not done with the school year yet, and next school year can come around and you can make an effort this summer to really evaluate and look at what you're teaching in your music room. What literature are you teaching? What songs have you been teaching? Are there songs you need to take out that you've just been stuck in your ways and you want to change out? And maybe what musical artist do you want to teach about? It's never too late to change things up. Nothing is ever set in stone, and you can always change things up as you go. And that's what's fun too about being a teacher is you can always change things up. It's never going to be set in stone. When you're planning to teach about Black artists in your classroom, yes, heavily focus on it in the month of February, but you can also teach about different musical genres and artists all year long. You don't just have to focus on it in one month. You can highlight it in the month of February, but I also think it's important that you also bring it in all school year long. While celebrating Black History Month, so I've seen this question asked in a lot of different Facebook groups and on the internet in various places is, what do I teach? What do I teach in the month of February for Black History Month? So there's no solid plan, saying do this only. Like I said at the beginning of this episode, you are the music teacher in your classroom, so you have leeway and say in what happens in your classroom. But with that said, I'm going to give you some suggestions for some ideas that have worked great for me. Find books. We've talked about books all episode long. And so find books about blues, jazz, hip hop, and rap, and R&B. And a lot of your kids are not familiar with some of those styles of music. Some of them maybe even listen to music over the radio, and they don't even know what style of music they're listening to. They just know they like the song. They just know that they like this particular style of music for whatever reason, but maybe they don't have a word to identify that song with. So giving them words and saying, this is blues, this is jazz, what you're listening to on the radio is hip hop and rap. Maybe they don't even know, but this is R&B. What you hear your parent listen to at home, they like R&B music. And so giving them various styles of music to listen to, and then comparing and contrasting those types of music. Maybe you were playing a jazz piece for your students, and then you play a blues piece, and they're comparing the two styles of music, and then they're contrasting them, which is something great to do with your upper elementary kiddos. And have them listen and talk about, why is it called blues? What do you hear in this jazz music? You've probably been doing some improvising with your students all year long, especially my ORF people. And so talking about improvising in jazz and how do they play all these, this music without ever even looking at a piece of music? They're just playing by ear. They're improvising. So that would be a great lesson to do, is you listen to a jazz piece of music with your kids And then you tell them, now you're going to get an instrument or you're going to use body percussion and you're going to improvise and just make up, a rhythm or music on your own. And so listening to different types of music, comparing and contrasting, students can then compose their own music. They can talk about the famous artists of these styles of music, give them various artists to listen to, and then talk about where these styles of music originated from, the roots of where they started. How did they start? What is the history behind this music? And what other styles of music are influenced by these types of music? Explain to your students that the music they listen to today didn't just start as that type of music. There is a reason this music started. There's history behind it. There is always music that influences other music. It's just how it happens. And so explain to your students, listen to various types of music and explain to them and have them explore and determine how that happens, especially with your upper elementary kids. Or if you're listening to this and you also teach middle and high school, these are great suggestions that you can do with your students as well. So, listen to various musical artists talk about their lives, talk about what was hard about them being a musical artist in the time they lived in, talk about their style of music, talk about why they were a musician when they could have done anything else. So, three of my absolute favorites are Stevie Wonder. And Stevie Wonder is one that's awesome to highlight because he was also blind. So, talk about hardship as a musician and how playing piano as a musical artist when you're blind, that is something great to speak to your students about. Ella Fitzgerald, one of my absolute favorites. Oh my goodness. And so playing music, a lot of your students probably have already heard music by Ella Fitzgerald, but they don't know who she is. Maybe they are not aware of how influential to music that she is. So bring music in from her and talk about other modern day music artists who have sung music that was written by Ella Fitzgerald or performed by Ella Fitzgerald, and how Ella Fitzgerald definitely influenced who they are as musicians to this day. Duke Ellington is another one who is really awesome to focus on. And you can highlight him and focus on these different musical artists by bulletin boards, books, listening to their music. There are, of course, a ton more that I did not mention, but you get to choose different musical artists that you want to focus on, whether it is musical artists from right now or from a long time ago. That's totally up to you. As long as you're highlighting different musical artists that are representing different styles of music, that's what's important. So the next one is, are there dances students can learn about or new instruments from these pieces of music? So when you're talking about jazz, highlight different instruments that the kids may or may not be familiar with. What is a double bass? Why does the performer stand up to play it or sit on a stool? Why is trombone and saxophone? Why are those heavy jazz instruments? Piano. How is the pianist performing on a jazz a jazz piece? How is that different than if they're playing classical piano? Explain the difference, contrast it. When someone's playing piano, in a rock performance, wow, are they playing? They're playing a keyboard, but why are they playing piano over here in a jazz band? So those are very important things to talk about while your kids are listening to different pieces. In dances they can learn. Are there dances associated with different styles of music from Black culture that you can highlight, that your kids can even watch maybe a YouTube video and then maybe learn it? Those are important things to consider as well. So we talked about popular music and students listening to music outside of class. So is there music they can bring in from popular artists that they can listen to together in class? They can talk about together and evaluate pieces like you would in a music appreciation class. Now, this is definitely something that probably needs to be pre-approved because, let's be honest, you don't want to get in trouble, and your students are aware like what's school appropriate and what's not. But I think it's important anyways, on a weekly basis, daily basis even, for you to stay familiar with what your students are listening to outside of school. It's important that you kind of stay aware. And so I feel like you should be doing that anyways, but if you're not, that's okay. But listening to music that they are listening to, and so you're aware if they say, can I bring in this piece of music? You're aware if it's clean or not clean. And then you can tell them that's not school appropriate, or, hey, let's find a clean version or an instrumental version. The next thing you can do for Black History Month or all school year long, that you're probably already doing this all school year long anyways, is you're teaching playground games and rhymes. A lot of the playground games and rhymes originated from many African American neighborhoods. Children play these anyways, like when they're just playing outside with their friends. So you can connect what students are already familiar with in some of their neighborhoods with what they're learning in your music room. I think forming these associations and forming these connections with your students is so important. So they see like, oh, wow, I'm doing music in everyday life without even realizing this is something we do in my music room. One example is Little Sally Walker. This may be a playground game that some of your students are already playing in their neighborhood. Another idea is spirituals. So spirituals is very, very important to the Black History Month. And spirituals is something that your students explain that, yes, they're going to say it's just church music. Well, yeah, I mean, they do sing spirituals at church, but it's not church music, and explain the history behind spirituals, where they started. This is very important to Black history and to having conversations with your students around their history and why it's important to talk about it and learn about spirituals. And so vary up what you do in your music room. Be prepared and just remember, this is your classroom. Effort goes a long way. You're not going to always know all the answers. You're going to have to do some research and planning on your own to find music to bring in your room, and what genres are you wanting to teach about? What musical artists do you want your students to listen to find good bulletin boards to hang up. If you can't find any, then create your own. Research what books to read to your students. There are no wrong answers, but find books that your students can see themselves in. There are new books coming out all the time. Students need to learn about and be exposed to a lot of different types of music before leaving your music room and going off to middle school or high school, you guys. It's your music room. It's up to you to do just that. So making an effort to meet your students where they're at, to represent all cultures coming into your classroom, is so important. So in the month of February, celebrate Black History Month. Make an effort to definitely teach music, listen to music, read about music, and learn about music with your students. And they are going to have their eyes and ears open to new experiences that maybe they've never gotten to experience before. And then continue teaching about Black history all school year long. Have an amazing week, friends, and I'll be back here again next week with another episode. Well, hey there. Thank you so much for listening into the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. There is an exclusive Facebook group just for listeners of this podcast and any elementary music teacher, called the Elementary Music Teacher Community Facebook group. Come on over and join us there, where we have conversations around the podcast episodes and encourage each other each and every week. And also head to my website, thedomesticmusician.com. I have some free resources there that you can download to help you gain traction in your classroom today, as well as the blog and the membership site and all kinds of other goodies to help you keep going in your music teaching journey. I cannot wait to keep connecting with you and encouraging you and spurring you on in your journey of teaching elementary music. Hang in there, have an amazing week, and I will see you soon.